In the freezing dawn, the almost deserted street reveals a suspended silence. A veteran police officer with rigid steps advances without noticing the car following him at a distance. A precise blow throws him onto the asphalt. The air escapes, his breathing becomes a heavy spasm. From the shadows, masked figures emerge slowly, certain in their advance. Then a German shepherd appears running down the alley, stopping next to the fallen body. The men hesitate. The low growl interrupts the rhythm of the attack. The officer extends a trembling arm while the dog positions itself as a barrier. And for a second, the cold asphalt seems to hold the entire city in suspense. Love stories with animals? Then subscribe now and don't miss any. Thank you for following us. Now we return to our story. Detective Marcus Thompson pulled his collar tight against the bitter wind as he walked down the nearly empty street in downtown Detroit. 22 years on the force had taught him to trust his instincts, and tonight something felt wrong. The streetlights cast long shadows between the abandoned warehouses, and the sound of his footsteps echoed off the brick walls like a lonely drumbeat. He had received the anonymous tip just 2 hours earlier, a voice on the phone claiming to have information about the corruption case he had been quietly investigating for months. The voice had been nervous, almost whispering, directing him to meet at this desolate corner of the industrial district. Marcus knew it could be a trap, but after hitting dead end after dead end in his investigation, he couldn't afford to ignore any lead, no matter how suspicious. The case had started innocuously enough. A few inconsistencies in evidence storage, some paperwork that didn't quite add up, overtime records that seemed inflated. But as Marcus dug deeper, he began to uncover a pattern of systematic fraud that seemed to reach high into the department's hierarchy. Money was being diverted, evidence was being mishandled, and cases were being deliberately mismanaged. It was the kind of corruption that could destroy public trust in law enforcement forever. As he turned the corner onto Industrial Avenue, Marcus noticed the black sedan parked in the shadows between two streetlights. Its engine was running, but no one was visible inside. His hand instinctively moved toward his service weapon, though he hoped he wouldn't need it. He'd always prided himself on resolving conflicts through dialogue and investigation rather than force. Suddenly, the sedan's doors opened and 3 figures emerged. They wore dark clothing and had their faces covered with ski masks, moving with the coordinated precision of a planned operation. Marcus's heart rate spiked as he realized this wasn't just a meeting, it was an ambush designed to silence him permanently. "Detective Thompson," one of the figures called out, his voice muffled by the mask. "You've been asking too many questions about things that don't concern you." Marcus raised his hands, trying to project calm authority despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. "I'm a police officer conducting an official investigation. Whatever grievances you have, we can discuss them through proper channels." The lead figure laughed, a sound devoid of humor. "Official investigation? You're a loose cannon who doesn't know when to quit. Some secrets are meant to stay buried, Detective. Tonight, your investigation ends." Before Marcus could respond, one of the other figures produced a small device and pointed it at him. A sharp electric shock coursed through his body, and his knees buckled. The stun gun had been set to a low voltage, enough to incapacitate him temporarily, but not cause permanent damage. As he fell to the asphalt, gasping for breath and struggling to maintain consciousness, Marcus realized this had been carefully planned to look like a random assault. The figures approached slowly, confident in their control of the situation. Through his blurred vision, Marcus could see them preparing to plant evidence that would discredit him and destroy his reputation. They intended to frame him for the very corruption he had been investigating, turning the hunter into the hunted. But then, from nowhere, a large German shepherd bounded out of a side alley. The dog was magnificent, at least 90 pounds of muscle and instinct, with intelligent brown eyes that seemed to assess the situation instantly. It had no collar or identifying tags, appearing to be a stray that had been surviving on the streets. The three masked figures froze as the dog positioned itself protectively beside Marcus's prone form. The animal didn't bark or snarl, but its presence radiated an unmistakable warning. Its hackles were raised, and it maintained steady eye contact with the would-be attackers, communicating clearly that any approach would be met with resistance. "What the hell?" muttered one of the figures. "Where did that come from?" The leader gestured impatiently. "It's just a dog. Get rid of it." But as they took a step forward, the German shepherd shifted into a defensive crouch, finally releasing a low, threatening growl that seemed to reverberate through the empty street. The sound was primal and intimidating, causing the three men to hesitate. Marcus, still struggling to regain his coordination from the electric shock, felt a wave of gratitude toward his unexpected guardian. He had always loved dogs, and something about this particular animal's intelligent demeanor suggested it was far from ordinary. The standoff continued for several tense minutes. The masked figures whispered among themselves, clearly debating whether to proceed with their plan or retreat. Finally, the leader made a decision. "This isn't over, Thompson," he called out. "You have 48 hours to drop your investigation and transfer to another precinct. If you don't, next time there won't be any interruptions." To emphasize their message, one of the figures pulled out a can of red spray paint and quickly drew a symbol on the pavement, a complex geometric design that made Marcus's blood run cold. He had seen that symbol before, 20 years ago, during his early days as a detective. It had appeared at the scene of a major evidence tampering scandal that had rocked the department. A case that had been mysteriously closed and sealed without resolution. The three figures retreated to their sedan and drove away, leaving Marcus alone on the cold asphalt with his canine rescuer. As the shock wore off and feeling returned to his limbs, he slowly pushed himself to his feet. The German shepherd watched him carefully, as if assessing his condition. "Hey there, boy," Marcus said softly, extending his hand for the dog to sniff. "Thank you for the help. You probably saved my career, if not my life." The dog approached cautiously, allowing Marcus to examine him more closely. Despite his apparent stray status, the animal was well fed and showed signs of training. His coat was thick and healthy, and his movements demonstrated discipline and intelligence far beyond that of a typical street dog. As Marcus began to walk back toward his car, the German shepherd fell into step beside him, as if he had decided to adopt the detective as his new partner. Marcus tried to shoo him away gently, knowing he couldn't take responsibility for a stray animal. But the dog persisted in following. "I can't keep you, buddy," Marcus said, though he was already growing attached to his rescuer. "But I suppose I owe you dinner for tonight." The dog seemed to understand, maintaining a comfortable pace as they walked through the industrial district. But instead of heading toward Marcus's parked car, the animal suddenly veered toward a narrow alley between two abandoned buildings. Marcus hesitated, then decided to follow his instincts and trust the dog's judgment. The alley led to a small courtyard behind a building that had once housed a textile factory. The windows were boarded up, and weeds grew through cracks in the foundation. But the German shepherd approached the building with purposeful determination. At the rear entrance, the dog sat and looked expectantly at Marcus, as if trying to communicate something important. The detective examined the door more closely and noticed that while it appeared to be secured with a rusted padlock, the lock had actually been cut and replaced with a similar-looking fake. Someone had been using this abandoned building as a meeting place or storage facility, and they had gone to great lengths to make it appear undisturbed. Marcus's investigative instincts kicked in, overriding his caution about entering a potentially dangerous location without backup. The German shepherd seemed to sense his hesitation and nuzzled against his leg encouragingly. There was something almost human-like in the animal's intelligence, as if he understood the importance of what they might discover inside. Marcus made his decision. If the dog had led him here for a reason, he owed it to his investigation and to his own safety to find out what secrets this building might hold. Marcus carefully removed the fake padlock and pushed open the heavy metal door. The hinges protested with a rusty squeal that seemed to echo through the empty building. The German Shepherd immediately trotted inside, moving with confidence through the darkness as if he had been here before. Using his phone's flashlight, Marcus illuminated the interior of what had once been the factory's main floor. Dust particles danced in the beam of light, and the air carried the musty smell of abandonment. But as his eyes adjusted, he noticed something that made his pulse quicken. This building wasn't as abandoned as it appeared from the outside. Recent footprints were visible in the dust, leading from the entrance toward a staircase at the far end of the room. Someone had been using this place regularly, and they had been careful to cover their tracks from anyone conducting a casual inspection. The German Shepherd seemed to know exactly where to go, leading Marcus toward the staircase with purposeful strides. On the second floor, Marcus discovered what appeared to be a makeshift office. A folding table had been set up in the center of the room, covered with manila folders, photographs, and documents that had been spread out as if someone had been reviewing them recently. A portable battery-powered lamp provided more substantial lighting than his phone, suggesting that whoever used this space spent considerable time here. Marcus's breath caught in his throat as he began to examine the materials on the table. The documents were photocopies of internal police reports, evidence logs, and administrative memos, all stamped with official department seals. Someone had been systematically collecting and analyzing sensitive police information, creating what appeared to be a comprehensive map of corruption within the Detroit Police Department. The photographs were particularly disturbing. They showed various police officers meeting with individuals who were known to be involved in questionable business practices. Not necessarily criminals, but people who operated in the gray areas of legality. The photos had been taken with telephoto lenses, suggesting extensive surveillance operations. But what truly shocked Marcus was discovering his own photograph among the collection. It showed him leaving the police station 3 days earlier, and someone had written notes on the back. Detective Marcus Thompson, Integrity Division. Investigating financial irregularities. Potential threat to operation. Requires neutralization. The word neutralization sent a chill down his spine. Tonight's ambush hadn't been random or even spontaneous. It had been part of a calculated campaign to stop his investigation. Someone within the department had been tracking his movements and reporting his activities to this shadow organization. The German Shepherd had been exploring the room independently, and now he approached Marcus with something in his mouth. It was a small recording device, no bigger than a matchbox. Marcus accepted the device and examined it carefully, noting that it was high-quality equipment, expensive and professional grade. When he pressed the play button, voices filled the room. The first voice was familiar. Captain Richard Sullivan, his direct supervisor and a man Marcus had trusted for over a decade. But Sullivan's words made Marcus's world shift beneath his feet. "Thompson is getting too close," Sullivan's voice said through the tiny speaker. "His investigation into the evidence room discrepancies is starting to connect dots that should stay disconnected. We need to discredit him before he stumbles onto the pension fund irregularities." A second voice, which Marcus didn't recognize, responded, "Discrediting him might not be enough. He's got a reputation for integrity that makes him dangerous. People trust him, and if he goes public with allegations, it could trigger a federal investigation." "Then we make sure he doesn't go public," Sullivan replied coldly. "Thompson has always been a by-the-book officer. If we can manufacture evidence that he's been taking bribes or tampering with evidence himself, his own integrity will destroy his credibility. No one will believe a corrupt cop's accusations about corruption." Marcus sank into a folding chair, feeling betrayed in a way he had never experienced before. Captain Sullivan had been his mentor, the man who had guided his career and taught him the importance of ethical policing. To discover that Sullivan was not only corrupt, but actively working to destroy him was devastating. The recording continued, revealing details about a systematic scheme to embezzle money from the police pension fund, manipulate evidence in high-profile cases to benefit certain individuals, and create a network of compromised officers who could be controlled through blackmail and intimidation. The scope of the corruption was staggering. It reached from beat cops all the way up to the chief of police. But perhaps most disturbing was the revelation that Marcus himself had unknowingly been investigating only the surface of this conspiracy. His focus on evidence room irregularities had been like examining the tip of an iceberg, unaware of the massive structure hidden beneath the surface. The German Shepherd seemed to sense his distress and nuzzled against his leg comfortingly. Marcus reached down to pet the animal, grateful for the companionship in this moment of revelation. "You knew, didn't you, boy?" he said quietly. "Somehow you knew I needed to find this place." As if in response, the dog moved to another corner of the room and began pawing at a loose floorboard. Marcus investigated and discovered a hidden compartment containing additional documents, bank statements, wire transfer records, and what appeared to be a comprehensive list of police officers who had been compromised by the conspiracy. Some of the names on the list shocked him. Officers he had worked with for years, people he had trusted with his life, were documented as being part of this network. Next to each name was a notation indicating either cooperative or requires monitoring, along with details about their specific roles in the operation. Marcus found his own name at the bottom of the list, marked as unaware potential threat requires elimination from force. The clinical language made it clear that this wasn't personal. He was simply an obstacle to be removed as efficiently as possible. But as he continued reading, Marcus discovered something that gave him hope. Several officers on the list were marked as suspected double agents or loyalty uncertain. It appeared that not everyone in the department had been successfully corrupted, and some officers might be secretly working to expose the conspiracy from within. One name in particular caught his attention: Detective Sarah Mitchell from Internal Affairs. Her file noted that she had been asking uncomfortable questions about pension fund management and had requested access to evidence room logs that predated Marcus's own investigation. Someone suspected that she might be conducting her own parallel investigation. The realization that he might not be alone in this fight provided Marcus with a sense of hope he hadn't felt since discovering the scope of the corruption. If Sarah Mitchell was indeed investigating the same issues, they might be able to work together to expose the truth. The German Shepherd had continued exploring and now stood at attention near a window that overlooked the alley behind the building. Marcus joined him and peered through the dirty glass, immediately spotting movement in the shadows below. Two figures were making their way toward the building's rear entrance, moving with the careful stealth of people who didn't want to be observed. Marcus quickly gathered the most important documents from the table, stuffing them into his jacket pockets. He couldn't risk being caught here with this evidence, but he also couldn't leave empty-handed. The recording device and the list of compromised officers were too valuable to abandon. The German Shepherd seemed to understand the urgency of the situation and was already moving toward an alternative exit, a fire escape that Marcus hadn't noticed earlier. The dog's street-smart survival instincts were proving invaluable, and Marcus was beginning to suspect that this animal was far more than just a lucky stray. As they made their escape through a window that led to the fire escape, Marcus heard voices from below. The two figures had entered the building and were making their way upstairs. From their conversation, it was clear they were there to retrieve and destroy evidence, probably in response to tonight's failed ambush. Marcus and his canine companion descended the fire escape as quietly as possible, grateful for the industrial noise from a nearby factory that helped mask the sound of their movement. As they reached the alley, Marcus realized that his life had fundamentally changed. He could never return to his normal routine, never trust his colleagues in the same way. never feel safe in his own precinct. The German Shepherd looked up at him expectantly, as if waiting for instructions about their next move. Marcus made a decision that would have seemed impossible just hours earlier. He was going to accept this mysterious dog as his partner in what had become the most important investigation of his career. Marcus drove through the pre-dawn streets of Detroit with the German Shepherd sitting alert in the passenger seat. The dog seemed to understand that they were fugitives now, constantly scanning the road ahead and behind them for signs of pursuit. Marcus's mind raced as he tried to process everything he had learned in the past few hours. He couldn't return to his apartment. It would be the first place they would look for him. He couldn't trust his colleagues, couldn't rely on his supervisor, couldn't even be certain that internal affairs wasn't compromised. The isolation was overwhelming, but the presence of his unlikely companion provided a strange comfort in the midst of chaos. As dawn broke over the city, Marcus made a decision that went against every protocol he had ever learned. He was going to reach out to Detective Sarah Mitchell, the internal affairs officer whose name had appeared on the list of potentially trustworthy officers. It was a massive risk. If he was wrong about her, he would be walking directly into the hands of his enemies. He used a payphone outside a diner on the outskirts of the city, a precaution that felt both paranoid and necessary. The German Shepherd waited patiently beside him, occasionally lifting his head to scan their surroundings with the alertness of a trained sentinel. Sarah Mitchell answered on the second ring, her voice professional but cautious. Internal Affairs, Detective Mitchell speaking. Detective Mitchell, this is Marcus Thompson from Integrity Division. I need to speak with you about a matter of mutual concern, but not over official channels. There was a long pause before she responded. Detective Thompson, I was under the impression that you were on administrative leave pending an investigation into financial irregularities. Marcus's heart sank. The conspiracy was moving faster than he had anticipated. They were already spreading disinformation about him, laying the groundwork to destroy his credibility. Detective, I can explain everything, but I need to meet with you in person. Away from the precinct. Another pause, longer this time. Marcus could almost hear her weighing the risks and benefits of such a meeting. Finally, she spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. Lincoln Park, near the statue, 1 hour. Come alone. The line went dead, leaving Marcus with mixed feelings of hope and apprehension. Either he was about to find a crucial ally in his fight against corruption, or he was walking into another trap. Lincoln Park at 7 in the morning was nearly deserted, except for a few early joggers and dog walkers. Marcus spotted Sarah Mitchell sitting on a bench near the Abraham Lincoln statue, wearing civilian clothes and sunglasses despite the overcast morning. She was a woman in her mid-30s with auburn hair and the alert posture of someone who had spent years in law enforcement. The German Shepherd trotted alongside Marcus as they approached the bench. Sarah's eyebrows raised when she noticed the dog, but she made no comment about his unusual partner. Detective Thompson, she said without preamble, you have exactly 10 minutes to explain why you called me before I report this conversation to my superiors. Marcus sat down beside her, keeping the German Shepherd between them as a buffer zone. Detective Mitchell, how long have you been investigating irregularities in the pension fund management? Her poker face slipped for just a moment, revealing surprise that he knew about her investigation. I don't know what you're referring to. Sarah. May I call you Sarah? Last night I was ambushed by 3 masked individuals who were sent to intimidate me into dropping my investigation into evidence room discrepancies. They left behind a symbol that connects to a 20-year-old case that was never resolved. Through a series of events I'm still trying to understand, I discovered a cache of documents that suggest our separate investigations are actually examining different aspects of the same massive conspiracy. Marcus pulled out photocopies of some of the documents he had recovered from the abandoned building, being careful not to reveal the full extent of what he had found. Sarah's professional composure cracked as she recognized official department letterhead and internal memo formats. "Where did you get these?" she asked, her voice tight with concern. "That's complicated to explain, but the important thing is that they're authentic. Sarah, Captain Sullivan is involved. So is Deputy Chief Harrison. The corruption goes all the way to the top, and they're systematically eliminating anyone who gets too close to the truth." Sarah removed her sunglasses and looked directly at Marcus for the first time. Her eyes were a striking green, but more importantly, they reflected the same dedication to justice that had driven his own career. "Marcus, 3 weeks ago I submitted a request for access to pension fund records dating back 5 years. The request was denied by Deputy Chief Harrison personally, with the notation that such records were classified for ongoing federal tax investigations. When I tried to verify this with the IRS, they had no record of any such investigation. The pieces were beginning to connect." Marcus leaned forward, his excitement building. "The evidence room irregularities I discovered weren't random theft or simple corruption. Someone was systematically removing and replacing evidence from cases that involved financial crimes. They were creating a clean paper trail while hiding the real evidence of embezzlement. And the pension fund manipulation was how they were laundering the stolen money," Sarah added, her investigative mind working parallel to his. Fake overtime claims, inflated equipment purchases, fictitious consulting contracts, all designed to move money from legitimate department budgets into personal accounts. The German shepherd, who had been lying quietly at their feet, suddenly raised his head and focused intently on something behind them. Marcus followed the dog's gaze and spotted a jogger who had passed by their bench 3 times in the past 10 minutes, each time slowing down as if trying to overhear their conversation. "We're being watched," Marcus said quietly. "We need to move." Sarah nodded, her training kicking in. "There's a coffee shop 6 blocks north of here. Meet me there in 20 minutes. Take a circuitous route and watch for surveillance." As they prepared to separate, the German shepherd made an unexpected move. Instead of following Marcus, the dog approached Sarah and sat directly in front of her, looking up with an expression that seemed almost human in its intelligence. "I think he's trying to tell you something," Marcus observed. Sarah knelt down and allowed the dog to sniff her hand. "He's not just any stray, is he? This dog has been trained for police work. Look at his posture, his alertness level, the way he's been scanning for threats. He's got all the characteristics of a retired or active K9 unit." Marcus felt a chill of realization. "But there's no record of any missing K9 officers in the department. I would have heard about it through official channels. Unless," Sarah said slowly, "he belonged to someone who couldn't report him missing through official channels. Someone who was forced to abandon him when they disappeared from their position." The implication was devastating. The German shepherd might be the only remaining evidence of another officer who had discovered the conspiracy and been eliminated, not physically, but professionally and personally destroyed to the point where they had to flee Detroit entirely. Sarah stood up and looked around the park with new wariness. "This changes everything, Marcus. If they've been systematically eliminating threats for years, then we're not just investigating corruption. We're investigating a cover-up that has destroyed careers and possibly lives." The German shepherd returned to Marcus's side, but the animal's behavior had changed subtly. He seemed more protective now, more alert to danger, as if Sarah's recognition of his training had awakened dormant instincts. 20 minutes, Sarah repeated, then added, "Marcus, bring the dog. I have a feeling he might be the key to understanding how deep this conspiracy really goes." As they walked away in opposite directions, Marcus reflected on how dramatically his world had changed in less than 24 hours. Yesterday, he had been a respected detective investigating minor irregularities. Today, he was a fugitive from his own department, partnered with a mysterious dog who might hold the secrets to a conspiracy that reached the highest levels of law enforcement. The German Shepherd stayed close to Marcus as they made their way through the city streets, taking an indirect route that allowed them to identify and avoid potential surveillance. The dog's street instincts continued to amaze Marcus. The animal seemed to have an uncanny ability to sense danger and guide them away from trouble. At one point, as they were walking past a row of shops, the dog suddenly stopped and refused to continue forward. Marcus was about to encourage him to keep moving when he noticed a familiar black sedan parked at the end of the block, the same vehicle that had been used in last night's ambush. They backtracked and took an alternate route, with Marcus feeling increasingly grateful for his canine partner's protective instincts. Whatever training this dog had received, and whoever had been responsible for that training, they had created an invaluable ally in the fight against corruption. As they approached the coffee shop for their meeting with Sarah, Marcus realized that he was no longer thinking of the German Shepherd as a stray animal he had rescued. Instead, he was beginning to see him as a partner who had rescued him, guiding him toward allies and away from enemies with an intelligence that seemed almost supernatural. The next phase of their investigation was about to begin, and Marcus had the distinct feeling that the dog knew exactly where they needed to go next. The coffee shop was a small, family-owned establishment that had been serving the community for decades. Its worn wooden floors and mismatched furniture created an atmosphere of comfortable anonymity, exactly what Marcus and Sarah needed for their clandestine meeting. Sarah had chosen a corner booth that provided clear sightlines to both entrances and the street outside. She was already seated when Marcus arrived with the German Shepherd, and he noticed that she had positioned herself like a professional who understood the importance of tactical awareness. "I've been thinking about our four-legged friend here," Sarah said as Marcus slid into the booth across from her. The dog immediately positioned himself where he could monitor the entire restaurant. "I ran an unofficial search through K9 unit records during the drive over here." Marcus felt his pulse quicken. "What did you find?" 3 years ago, we had a detective named James Morrison who worked with a German Shepherd named Rex. Morrison was investigating financial irregularities in the evidence storage facility, essentially the same case you stumbled into. According to official records, Morrison requested a transfer to the Seattle Police Department and left Detroit voluntarily. Sarah paused to sip her coffee, but her eyes continued scanning the restaurant. "But here's what doesn't add up. I contacted a friend in Seattle PD. James Morrison never reported for duty there. In fact, they have no record of him ever completing the transfer process. He simply vanished." Marcus looked down at the German Shepherd, who was watching Sarah intently, almost as if he understood every word she was saying. "You think this is Rex, Morrison's partner? I think it's more than possible." German Shepherds are incredibly loyal, and K9 dogs form bonds with their handlers that last a lifetime. If something happened to Morrison, if he was forced to disappear or relocate under witness protection, Rex might have escaped and been searching for him ever since. The implications were staggering. If Sarah was right, then the dog who had saved Marcus from last night's ambush was actually a highly trained police dog whose handler had been neutralized by the same conspiracy Marcus was now fighting. "But why would Rex help me?" Marcus asked. "I never worked with Morrison." Sarah leaned forward conspiratorially. "Because you're investigating the same case Morrison was working on. K9 dogs are trained to recognize patterns and associate behaviors. Rex might understand that you're continuing Morrison's work, making you an ally in his mind, as if responding to his name." The German Shepherd, Rex, raised his head and looked directly at Sarah. For a moment, his intelligent brown eyes seemed to convey recognition and approval. "There's something else," Sarah continued. "Morrison had a reputation for being obsessively thorough in his investigations. If he discovered evidence of this conspiracy, he would have documented everything meticulously. And if he had to disappear suddenly, he might have hidden that evidence where only Rex could find it." Marcus felt a surge of excitement mixed with apprehension. You're suggesting that Rex has been trying to lead me to Morrison's hidden evidence. Indeed, it would explain how he knew to take you to that abandoned building last night. It would explain his uncanny ability to avoid surveillance and identify threats. Rex isn't just a street-smart stray, he's a detective's partner trying to complete an interrupted mission. The pieces were falling into place with startling clarity. Marcus recalled how purposefully Rex had led him through the city, how the dogs seemed to know exactly where they needed to go at each step of their journey. It hadn't been random wandering. It had been a carefully guided investigation led by a partner who couldn't speak, but could still point the way toward truth. Sarah, we need to let Rex take the lead on this investigation. If he knows where Morrison hid additional evidence, it could be the key to exposing this entire conspiracy. Before Sarah could respond, Rex suddenly stood up and moved to the window, his body tense with alertness. Outside, the same black sedan from the previous night was slowly cruising past the coffee shop. Marcus and Sarah instinctively ducked lower in their booth, using the window frame to shield themselves from view. "They found us," Marcus whispered. "We need to get out of here." Sarah was already gathering her things. "There's a back exit through the kitchen. I'll create a distraction at the front entrance while you and Rex slip out the rear." "No," Marcus said firmly. "We stay together. Rex has kept me alive this long by avoiding confrontation, not by splitting up and taking unnecessary risks." Rex had already moved toward the back of the restaurant, his tactical instincts guiding him toward the safest exit. Marcus and Sarah followed, trying to appear casual to avoid attracting attention from other customers. The kitchen staff looked surprised to see customers entering their workspace, but Sarah quickly flashed her badge and explained that they were conducting an undercover investigation. The explanation satisfied the curious workers, who gestured toward a delivery entrance that opened onto an alley behind the building. As they stepped into the alley, Rex immediately began moving toward the east, away from the main street where the sedan had been circling. His pace was urgent but controlled, suggesting that he had a specific destination in mind. "He's taking us somewhere," Marcus observed. "Somewhere he thinks will be safe." They followed Rex through a maze of alleys and side streets, occasionally pausing to allow him to assess their surroundings and ensure they weren't being followed. The dog's navigation skills were remarkable. He seemed to have memorized every shortcut and hiding spot in this part of the city. After 20 minutes of careful movement, Rex led them to an abandoned auto repair shop in an industrial area that had been declining for years. The building looked like it had been closed for months, with boarded windows and overgrown weeds around the foundation. But Rex approached the building with the confidence of familiarity, leading them to a side entrance that had been partially concealed by deliberate camouflage. Someone had gone to great lengths to make this location appear completely abandoned while maintaining secret access. Inside, they discovered what appeared to be a safe house that had been prepared by someone who understood the need for prolonged concealment. The space contained basic supplies, canned food, bottled water, camping equipment, and most importantly, a sophisticated communications setup that could monitor police radio frequencies. "Morrison set this up," Sarah said with certainty. "This is where he was planning to continue his investigation if he had to go underground." Rex was already moving purposefully toward a corner of the room where a large toolbox sat on a workbench. He sat down beside the toolbox and looked expectantly at Marcus, clearly indicating that this was what they had come to find. Inside the toolbox, beneath a false bottom that required careful manipulation to open, they discovered Morrison's complete investigation file. It contained evidence that went far beyond what Marcus had found in the abandoned building. Detailed financial records, photographs of secret meetings, recorded conversations, and a comprehensive organizational chart that mapped the entire corruption network. The scope of the conspiracy was breathtaking. Involved not just police officers, but city council members, judges, business leaders, and federal law enforcement officials. The corruption had metastasized throughout Detroit's power structure, creating a shadow government that operated parallel to legitimate authority. But most shocking was the discovery of Morrison's personal journal, which documented his growing awareness that he was being hunted by his own colleagues. His final entries described his realization that he would have to disappear completely to avoid being framed for crimes he was actually investigating. The last entry was dated 3 years ago. Rex understands the mission better than anyone. If something happens to me, he'll find someone worthy to continue the work. I've trained him to recognize the qualities of a true detective: integrity, persistence, and the courage to stand up for what's right. He'll know who to trust. Marcus looked down at Rex, who was watching him with an expression of patient expectation. The dog had been carrying out Morrison's final mission for 3 years, waiting for the right person to appear who could complete the work his beloved handler had started. "He chose you, Marcus," Sarah said softly. "Out of all the officers in Detroit, Rex recognized something in you that made him believe you could succeed where Morrison had to retreat." The weight of that responsibility was overwhelming, but also inspiring. Marcus knelt down and scratched Rex behind the ears, feeling a bond forming that went deeper than mere partnership. "We're going to finish this, boy," he promised. "We're going to expose the truth and make sure Morrison's sacrifice wasn't in vain." Rex's tail wagged slightly, the first sign of pure dog-like happiness Marcus had seen from him. It was as if the animal finally believed that his long mission might be approaching completion. But as they prepared to examine Morrison's evidence more carefully, Rex suddenly tensed and moved toward the concealed entrance. Through the sophisticated monitoring equipment, they could hear radio chatter, indicating that multiple police units were converging on their location. The conspiracy had found them again, and this time they had brought overwhelming force. The police radio crackled with coordinated communications as multiple units surrounded the abandoned auto repair shop. Marcus counted at least 6 different call signs, indicating a substantial force deployment that went well beyond what would be normal for investigating 2 supposedly rogue detectives. "They're treating us like armed and dangerous fugitives," Sarah observed, her voice tight with concern. "This isn't a standard apprehension. They're planning to ensure we can't testify about what we've discovered." Rex had positioned himself near the monitoring equipment, his ears tracking the movement of officers outside the building. His tactical training was evident in how he processed the threat assessment, occasionally looking toward Marcus and Sarah as if calculating their best escape options. Marcus quickly photographed the most critical documents from Morrison's investigation file, uploading them to a secure cloud storage account he maintained for sensitive cases. If they didn't survive the next hour, at least the evidence would still exist somewhere accessible to honest investigators. "Sarah, we need to get this information to someone outside the Detroit Police Department. Someone who can't be corrupted or intimidated by this network." Sarah nodded, already thinking through their options. "I have a contact at the FBI's Detroit field office, Agent Patricia Williams. She's been investigating municipal corruption in several Midwest cities. But we need to reach her directly, not through official channels." The radio chatter suddenly intensified, indicating that the perimeter was complete and officers were preparing to breach the building. Rex's body language shifted from alertness to preparation for action, his muscles tensing like a coiled spring. But instead of heading toward any of the obvious exits, Rex moved toward what appeared to be a solid wall at the back of the shop. He began pawing at a section of the wall that looked identical to the rest, but under closer examination revealed itself to be a carefully camouflaged emergency exit. Morrison had prepared for exactly this situation. The hidden exit led to a network of storm drains that connected to the city's underground infrastructure, providing multiple escape routes that would be impossible for surface surveillance to track. Morrison thought of everything, Marcus marveled, as they prepared to enter the drainage system. He knew that eventually they would find his safe house. Rex led them through the underground passages with the confidence of someone who had mapped these routes extensively. The storm drains were larger than Marcus had expected, allowing them to move quickly through the subterranean network while remaining completely invisible to the officers above. As they navigated the tunnels, Sarah used her secure phone to contact Agent Williams at the FBI. The conversation was brief but productive. Williams agreed to meet them at a location that would provide both security and the ability to quickly mobilize federal resources if necessary. After 30 minutes of underground travel, Rex guided them to an exit point near Detroit's riverfront, emerging into an area of abandoned warehouses that had been slated for urban renewal, but never developed. The location was perfect for a clandestine meeting, isolated enough to avoid casual observation, but accessible to federal agents who knew the area. Agent Patricia Williams was waiting for them in an unmarked federal vehicle, a professional woman in her 40s who radiated the competence and integrity that had made her successful in investigating government corruption. She examined their evidence with the careful attention of someone who understood its significance. "This is substantial," she said after reviewing Morrison's documentation and Marcus's additional discoveries. "The financial records alone would support federal charges against dozens of individuals. But the scope of this conspiracy means we're going to need to coordinate with multiple agencies to ensure everyone involved is arrested simultaneously." Marcus felt a wave of relief mixed with exhaustion. After days of running and hiding, it was liberating to finally be working with someone who had the authority and resources to act on their discoveries. But Rex remained alert and vigilant, his attention focused on the surrounding area as if he sensed that their ordeal wasn't over yet. His instincts proved correct when Agent Williams received a call that made her expression darken with concern. "We have a problem," she announced after ending the call. "Someone within federal law enforcement has been monitoring communications related to Detroit police corruption investigations. They know we're meeting, and they're trying to interfere with our operation." The conspiracy reached even further than they had imagined. The corruption network had infiltrated federal agencies as well as local law enforcement, creating a web of compromised officials that could sabotage investigations from within. "Agent Williams, we need to act immediately," Sarah urged. "Every hour we delay gives them more time to destroy evidence and eliminate witnesses." Williams nodded grimly. "I'm going to contact the U.S. Attorney's Office directly and request emergency warrants. But we'll need to keep you safe while the arrests are being coordinated. This safe house location has been compromised." Rex suddenly stood up and moved toward the warehouse entrance, his body language indicating the approach of multiple vehicles. Through the windows, they could see a convoy of unmarked cars surrounding the building, but these weren't FBI vehicles. "Deputy Chief Harrison," Marcus recognized the voice echoing from outside the warehouse. "Detective Thompson and Detective Mitchell, we know you're in there. You're surrounded by lawful police officers executing valid warrants for your arrest." Agent Williams checked her secure communications device and shook her head. "No warrants have been issued through federal channels. This is an illegal detention operation designed to silence you before you can testify." The situation had reached a critical point. They were trapped between corrupt local officers and compromised federal agents, with only one honest FBI agent and a loyal German shepherd as allies. But Rex had been in similar situations before, and he seemed to have developed a plan. He moved toward a section of the warehouse that contained old shipping containers, his movements indicating that he wanted them to follow him toward what appeared to be another of Morrison's prepared hiding spots. Inside one of the shipping containers, they discovered Morrison's ultimate contingency plan, a comprehensive digital archive of his investigation, complete with video testimonies he had recorded as insurance against exactly this type of suppression attempt. "Morrison was brilliant," Agent Williams observed as she reviewed the digital files. He created an evidence package that's impossible to destroy or suppress. Everything is authenticated, time-stamped, and backed up to multiple secure servers. The videos showed Morrison interviewing witnesses who had been too frightened to come forward officially, documenting patterns of corruption that stretched back over a decade. Most importantly, they contained Morrison's prediction that the conspiracy would eventually try to frame honest officers and eliminate federal oversight. He knew they would come after anyone who got too close to the truth. Marcus realized that's why he trained Rex to find a successor who could complete the mission. Rex looked up at Marcus with an expression that seemed almost human in its satisfaction. His long vigil was finally nearing an end, and his beloved handler's work was about to receive the justice it deserved. Agent Williams was already coordinating with U.S. attorneys in multiple jurisdictions, using Morrison's evidence package to support simultaneous arrest warrants that would prevent the conspiracy from regrouping or destroying evidence. Outside the warehouse, the corrupt officers were growing impatient with their illegal detention operation. Deputy Chief Harrison's voice became increasingly threatening as he demanded their surrender. But his authority was about to become irrelevant. Within minutes, legitimate federal agents began arriving at the scene, armed with genuine arrest warrants for the officers who had been conducting the unauthorized operation. The tables had turned completely. The hunters had become the hunted. As Deputy Chief Harrison and Captain Sullivan were led away in federal custody, Marcus felt a profound sense of vindication. Morrison's sacrifice hadn't been in vain, and Rex's 3-year mission was finally approaching completion. But the German Shepherd showed no signs of relaxation or celebration. His alert posture suggested that he understood their victory was still incomplete, and that the final chapter of this investigation required one more crucial revelation. 3 months later, Marcus stood in the witness box of a federal courthouse, delivering testimony that would reshape law enforcement in Detroit forever. The massive corruption trial had attracted national media attention, with reporters from across the country documenting how a mysterious German shepherd had helped expose one of the largest police corruption scandals in American history. Rex sat in the gallery, officially recognized by the court as a key witness whose actions had made the investigation possible. The judge had made an unprecedented ruling, allowing the dog to remain present throughout the proceedings. Acknowledging his unique contribution to the case, Sarah Mitchell, now promoted to lead a reformed internal affairs division, had testified earlier about the systematic evidence tampering and pension fund embezzlement that had cost the city millions of dollars. Agent Patricia Williams had presented the federal government's case, demonstrating how the conspiracy had reached into multiple law enforcement agencies and municipal offices. But it was Marcus's testimony about Morrison's investigation and Rex's role in continuing that work that captured the public's imagination. The story of a loyal police dog who had spent 3 years searching for someone worthy to complete his handler's mission had become a symbol of integrity and perseverance in the face of overwhelming corruption. Detective Thompson, the prosecutor asked, can you explain to the jury how Rex identified you as someone who could be trusted to continue Detective Morrison's investigation? Marcus looked across the courtroom at Rex, who was watching the proceedings with the same intelligent attention he had brought to their investigation. Your Honor, I believe Rex recognized in me the same qualities that Detective Morrison had valued. A commitment to truth and justice that couldn't be compromised or intimidated. Dogs have an uncanny ability to sense character, and Rex somehow understood that I would follow the evidence wherever it led, regardless of personal cost. The defense attorney for Deputy Chief Harrison attempted to discredit Rex's contributions to the case, arguing that a dog's actions couldn't be considered reliable evidence. But the prosecutor had prepared for this challenge, presenting testimony from K-9 training experts who explained the sophisticated problem-solving abilities of police dogs and their capacity for complex reasoning. Rex didn't just randomly lead Detective Thompson to evidence. Dr. Jennifer Collins, a canine behavior specialist, explained to the jury. His actions demonstrated strategic thinking and pattern recognition. He identified threats, avoided surveillance, and guided the investigation toward specific locations where Detective Morrison had hidden documentation. This level of purposeful behavior indicates advanced training and a clear understanding of his mission. As the trial progressed, the full scope of Morrison's investigation became clear to the public. He had been building a case that would have exposed corruption, reaching all the way to the mayor's office and the federal courthouse. His evidence documented a network of bribes, kickbacks, evidence tampering, and witness intimidation that had allowed serious offenders to escape justice while innocent people were prosecuted. The revelation that shocked Marcus most was learning Morrison's ultimate fate. Agent Williams had used federal resources to trace Morrison's disappearance and discovered that he had indeed entered witness protection after receiving credible threats against his life. He was alive and well, living under a new identity in Oregon, but had been forbidden from contacting anyone in Detroit until the conspiracy was dismantled. Detective Morrison has been following this trial through news coverage. Agent Williams informed Marcus during a recess. He wanted you to know that Rex chose well. He's incredibly proud of what you've accomplished. The emotional weight of that message was overwhelming. Morrison had sacrificed his career, his identity, and his beloved partner to preserve evidence that would eventually bring justice. Rex had carried that burden for 3 years, waiting patiently for the right person to appear who could complete the mission. During the final week of the trial, something extraordinary happened. The judge announced that a special video testimony would be presented to the court. Detective James Morrison, speaking from his secure location in witness protection, would provide his first-hand account of the investigation that had started it all. Morrison appeared on the courtroom's video screen as a man in his 50s with graying hair and the weathered face of someone who had experienced profound loss and vindication. But his eyes lit up with unmistakable joy when he saw Rex sitting in the gallery. "Rex," Morrison said, his voice thick with emotion, "good boy. You completed the mission, partner. I knew you would find someone worthy to carry on our work." Rex's reaction was immediate and heartbreaking. The stoic German shepherd, who had maintained professional composure throughout their investigation, suddenly came alive with pure canine excitement. His tail wagged furiously, and he whined with the joy of finally seeing his beloved handler after 3 years of separation. The judge allowed a brief recess so that Rex could approach the video screen, where he placed his paws against the monitor and attempted to nuzzle Morrison's image. The courtroom was filled with the emotional impact of a reunion between partners who had been forced apart by corruption but were now united in victory. Morrison's testimony provided the final pieces of evidence needed to secure convictions against all the major conspirators. Deputy Chief Harrison received a 15-year federal sentence for racketeering and conspiracy. Captain Sullivan was sentenced to 12 years for his role in the evidence tampering scheme. Dozens of other officers, city officials, and business leaders received sentences ranging from probation to 10 years in prison. But beyond the legal victories, the case had transformed public perception of law enforcement in Detroit. The story of Rex's loyalty and Marcus's courage had restored faith in the possibility of honest policing. Community support for law enforcement reached levels not seen in decades, as citizens understood that there were still officers willing to sacrifice everything for justice. 6 months after the trial concluded, Marcus was promoted to detective sergeant and put in charge of a new anti-corruption unit designed to prevent future conspiracies. Sarah Mitchell was appointed as the new Deputy Chief of Internal Affairs, making her one of the youngest officers ever to reach that rank. Agent Williams received a commendation from the FBI director and was assigned to lead a national task force on municipal corruption. But the most meaningful recognition came from an unexpected source. The Detroit City Council voted unanimously to create a special position for Rex as an honorary K-9 officer with the newly reformed police department. He would work alongside Marcus in the anti-corruption unit, using his unique abilities to identify threats and guide investigations. On the day Rex was officially sworn in as Detroit's first honorary detective K-9, Marcus reflected on the incredible journey that had brought them together. What had started as a routine investigation into minor evidence discrepancies had become a fight for the soul of law enforcement in their city. "You know, Rex," Marcus said as they walked through Lincoln Park where he had first met Sarah Mitchell, "Morrison trained you well. You understood something that took me years to learn, that integrity isn't just about following rules. It's about having the courage to do what's right, even when everyone around you is corrupt." Rex looked up at Marcus with the same intelligent expression that had characterized their entire partnership. But now, there was something new in his eyes, contentment. His mission was complete, but his purpose had evolved. He was no longer searching for someone to trust with Morrison's evidence. He was now partnered with someone who shared his commitment to justice. The Detroit Police Department had been transformed by their investigation, with new oversight procedures, transparency requirements, and ethical training programs designed to prevent future corruption. The city had implemented civilian review boards and mandatory body cameras for all officers. Most importantly, a culture change had occurred that made it clear that corruption would not be tolerated at any level. As Marcus and Rex prepared to begin their new assignment, investigating reports of procurement fraud in the fire department, Marcus received a phone call that brought their story full circle. "Detective Thompson, this is James Morrison," the voice said. "I'll be able to leave witness protection next month, and I'm requesting reassignment to Detroit PD. I'd like to work in your anti-corruption unit, if you'll have me." The reunion between Morrison and Rex took place at Detroit Metropolitan Airport on a sunny Tuesday morning in June. Marcus watched as the man and dog embraced with the joy of partners who had been separated by duty but were now free to work together again. "Rex kept your investigation alive for 3 years," Marcus told Morrison as they drove through the city where their cases had intersected. "He never gave up hope that justice would prevail." Morrison scratched Rex behind the ears, a gesture that seemed to restore both of them to completeness. "That's what good partners do. They never abandon the mission, no matter how impossible it seems." The three of them, Marcus, Morrison, and Rex, formed an unprecedented team within the Detroit Police Department. Their reputation for uncovering corruption and protecting honest officers spread throughout law enforcement circles, inspiring similar anti-corruption units in cities across the country. Years later, when Marcus would tell the story of how a German shepherd had saved both his career and his city's integrity, people would shake their heads in amazement at the intelligence and loyalty Rex had demonstrated. But Marcus knew the truth was simpler and more profound than that. Rex hadn't just been following commands or exhibiting trained behaviors. He had been fulfilling a promise made to his original partner, a promise to continue fighting for justice, no matter how long it took or how difficult the mission became. In finding Marcus, Rex had found someone who understood that promise and was willing to honor it. The legacy of their investigation extended far beyond the corruption convictions and department reforms. It had proven that integrity and courage could triumph over systematic dishonesty, that loyalty and perseverance could overcome seemingly impossible odds, and that sometimes the most unlikely partnerships could achieve the most extraordinary results. Rex continued working as an honorary detective until his retirement at age 12. Having served both Morrison and Marcus with distinction, that redefined what it meant to be a faithful partner in law enforcement. His story became required reading in police academies across the country, inspiring a new generation of officers to understand that their duty extended beyond following orders to embracing the highest principles of justice and integrity. When Rex finally passed away peacefully in his sleep at age 14, the entire Detroit Police Department attended his funeral. The mayor declared it a day of recognition for all officers who had served with honor, and a bronze statue of Rex was installed outside police headquarters with an inscription that read, "In memory of Detective Rex, whose loyalty and courage reminded us all what it means to protect and serve." Marcus, now Deputy Chief of the Detroit Police Department, spoke at the ceremony. Rex taught us that true partnership transcends species, that loyalty transcends time, and that justice transcends corruption. He showed us that sometimes the most important investigations are the ones we inherit from those who came before us, and our responsibility is to see them through to completion, no matter what obstacles we face. Morrison, who had been promoted to Captain of Internal Affairs, added his own tribute. Rex understood something that took me years to learn, that integrity isn't a job requirement, it's a way of life. He lived that truth every day of his service, and he inspired everyone around him to do the same. The transformation of Detroit's police department became a model for law enforcement reform nationwide. The story of how a German shepherd had exposed corruption and restored public trust was studied in universities, written about in books, and eventually adapted into a documentary that won critical acclaim for its portrayal of loyalty and justice in the face of overwhelming adversity. But for Marcus, the most important legacy of his partnership with Rex was personal. The experience had taught him that heroism often comes from unlikely sources, that courage can be found in the most unexpected places, and that sometimes the most important battles are fought not with weapons or authority, but with patience, persistence, and an unwavering commitment to truth. As he sat in his office years later, looking at a photograph of himself, Morrison, and Rex, taken on the day they had officially become partners in the anti-corruption unit, Marcus reflected on how profoundly his life had been changed by one cold night when a mysterious dog had appeared to save him from an ambush. That night had seemed like the end of his career, but it had actually been the beginning of his true calling. Rex had shown him that being a good detective meant more than solving cases. It meant protecting the integrity of the entire system of justice, ensuring that future generations would inherit law enforcement they could trust and respect. The story of Detective Rex had become legend, but the principles he represented continued to guide the officers who followed in his footsteps. In a world where cynicism about law enforcement often dominated headlines, Rex's legacy provided proof that honor, courage, and integrity could still triumph over corruption and dishonesty. And sometimes, late at night, when Marcus walked through the same streets where Rex had once guided him toward truth and justice, he could swear he still felt the presence of his four-legged partner, continuing to watch over the city they had worked together to protect and serve. Dear listeners, we hope that the story of Detective Marcus Thompson and the legendary Rex has moved you as much as it moved us to share it. This tale of loyalty, courage, and justice reminds us that heroes come in all forms, and that integrity can triumph even against overwhelming odds. If this story touched your heart and inspired you to believe in the power of partnership and perseverance, we invite you to join our community of storytelling enthusiasts. Please subscribe to our channel to receive more incredible stories like this one, and don't forget to give this video a thumbs up to help others discover Rex's remarkable legacy. We bring you new stories of courage, loyalty, and justice every week, exploring the extraordinary bonds that can form between humans and the animals who change their lives forever. Share your thoughts about Rex and Marcus's journey in the comments below. We love hearing how these stories inspire our listeners to see the world through new eyes. Until next time, remember that sometimes the most important partnerships are the ones we never expected to find.